What if a mistake you made years ago never truly disappeared? What if something you thought had been buried in the past was still watching from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to remind you that some actions can never be undone? The stories you're about to hear were shared by ordinary people. Some involve spirits, some involve curses, and some involve grief so powerful that it seemed to survive even death itself. Whether you believe in the supernatural or not, these stories may leave you wondering if there are some things in this world that refuse to move on. Mr. H began his story with a confession. Back in the year 2000, he met a young woman and fell in love with her. Their relationship lasted nearly 10 years before they eventually separated in 2010. But long before the breakup, something happened that would change both of their lives forever. In 2005, while they were still students, his girlfriend became pregnant. The pregnancy was unexpected. Neither of them had stable jobs, and neither felt ready to become parents. After many difficult discussions, they made the decision to terminate the pregnancy. One day, Mr. H accompanied his girlfriend to the clinic. The procedure was completed, and life appeared to return to normal. At least, that was what they believed. For almost 2 years, nothing unusual happened. Then one morning, while eating breakfast at a small noodle shop, Mr. H encountered a woman he had never seen before. She sat near him for several minutes, occasionally glancing in his direction. Finally, she leaned forward and asked him a strange question. "Do you have a girlfriend?" The question caught him off guard, but he answered politely. The woman continued, "Have you and your girlfriend ever had a child together?" Mr. H froze. Before he could respond, she added another sentence. "A child that was aborted when the pregnancy was around 3 months old." A chill ran down his spine. He had never met this woman before. No one around them should have known such a private detail. Yet she spoke as though she had witnessed it herself. Then she said something even stranger. The child was a boy. Mr. H stared at her in silence. The woman's expression remained completely calm. "You and your girlfriend will never end up together," she said. "You will never marry each other." A strange feeling settled over him, but the woman wasn't finished. "And even after you separate, neither of you will be able to find happiness with anyone else." She pointed directly at him. "If you meet another woman, that boy will drive her away." Then she continued, "If your former girlfriend meets another man, he will drive him away as well." The woman spoke with absolute certainty. Mr. H left the restaurant feeling shaken. Part of him wanted to dismiss everything as nonsense. Yet another part of him couldn't stop thinking about what she had said. Years passed. Eventually, he and his girlfriend broke up. At first, he thought the woman had simply guessed correctly. But then, something strange began happening. Every relationship he entered ended the same way. He would meet someone. They would get along well. Feelings would develop. Everything would seem normal. Then suddenly, arguments would appear out of nowhere. Minor disagreements would escalate into major conflicts. The relationship would collapse within days. Again, and again, and again. No matter how hard he tried, the outcome never changed. What made things even stranger was that his former girlfriend experienced the exact same problem. Years after their breakup, neither of them had managed to build a lasting relationship with anyone. As time passed, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Mr. H approached 40 years old. Many women had entered his life. Some genuinely cared about him. some he deeply cared about in return. Yet every single relationship ended before it truly began. He felt as though something invisible was standing between him and happiness, something that refused to let him move forward. Desperate for answers, he began searching for spiritual masters. He visited temples. He asked friends for recommendations. He traveled to places where people claimed powerful practitioners could help. But every time he got close to finding someone, something would happen. Appointments would be canceled. Unexpected problems would arise. Plans would fall apart. It was almost as if an unseen force was actively preventing him from getting help. The years continued to pass. The loneliness grew heavier. At night, he often lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering whether the woman at the noodle shop had been telling the truth. Had the spirit of the unborn child really remained behind? Was it possible that the son who never had the chance to be born had spent all these years refusing to let either parent move on? Even now, he still doesn't know the answer. But after more than a decade of failed relationships, he can no longer convince himself that it's merely coincidence. Not far from another village stood an old three-way intersection. Even during daylight, the place felt unsettling. The area was surrounded by dense vegetation, and giant trees blocked much of the sunlight. Few people lived nearby. Those who passed through often described the same sensation: a sudden chill, the feeling of being watched, the strange certainty that something was hiding among the shadows. Deep inside the intersection stood an old well. Before water pumps became common, villagers relied on it for their daily water supply. Yet, nobody liked going there alone. Whenever water was needed, people traveled in groups, 5, sometimes 6 at a time. That was how frightened they were of the place. One afternoon, a woman known as Aunt Two joined the group heading to the well. Everything seemed normal. The group filled their containers and prepared to leave. Then something terrifying happened. As Aunt Two lifted her bucket, her vision suddenly became blurry. At first, she thought dust had entered her eyes, but the darkness continued spreading. Her sight grew weaker and weaker. Within minutes, she could barely see anything at all. The people around her panicked. No one understood what was happening. They rushed her home and sought help from anyone who might know the cause. Weeks passed, then months. Eventually, the family brought her to an elderly spiritual master. The moment she stepped through the doorway, the old man looked directly at her and spoke. "Your eyes have gone blind, haven't they?" The family was stunned. No one had explained the situation yet, but the old man already seemed to know exactly why they'd come. Then he revealed something even more disturbing. According to him, an ancient ghost had been living near the old well for many years. The spirit resided inside a ruined house hidden among the trees, and somehow it had attached itself to Aunt Two during her visit. Fortunately, the old man was highly respected for his abilities. He immediately performed a ritual. Not long afterward, Aunt Two's vision slowly began to return. Before they left, the spiritual master handed the family a powerful talisman and instructed them to place it above the front entrance of their home. He also gave Aunt Two a smaller talisman. "Carry this whenever you go to the well," he told her. From that day forward, she never experienced the problem again. Years passed. The village slowly expanded. More families moved into the area. Roads improved. Water pumps became common, and people no longer needed to collect water from the old well. Eventually, a lion dance troupe built a storage shed beside it. The building was used to store drums, costumes, masks, and equipment. For a while, everything seemed normal. Then, For reasons nobody understood, the troop abandoned the shed. The building sat empty for years. As time passed, weeds grew around it. The structure slowly decayed. Seeing the abandoned building become an eyesore, village officials eventually decided to tear it down. The demolition took place without incident. At least, that's what everyone thought. That very night, a woman returning home late passed by the area. As she approached the land where the building had stood, she noticed something standing in the darkness. At first, she thought it was another person. Then she got closer. The figure appeared to be a young woman. Her hair hung unnaturally long. She wore a plain white dress, but there was something terribly wrong. The woman had no feet. Her body hovered slightly above the ground. The moment the figure noticed her, it slowly turned around. Then it smiled. The witness nearly collapsed from fear. She pedaled her bicycle as fast as she could and didn't stop until she reached home. The next morning, she told everyone what she had seen. Most people dismissed the story. They assumed she had imagined it. But only a few days later, another witness came forward. This time it was a taxi driver. Late one night, he happened to pass the same location. As he drove by, he noticed a woman standing inside the ruins. The driver wasn't particularly superstitious. Instead of running away, he became curious. He rolled down the window and reached for his phone. "Let's see who you really are," he muttered. Just as he prepared to take a photograph, the figure vanished. Completely. There was no movement, no sound. 1 second she was there. The next second she was gone. After that, stories began spreading throughout the village. People avoided the road after dark. Children were warned never to go near the old well. Then came the incident that convinced everyone something unnatural was happening. One night, several village elders gathered nearby to drink and talk. The evening was peaceful. Then, without warning, they heard the sound of a child crying. The crying came from the abandoned land. It wasn't the normal cry of a child. It sounded desperate, agonizing, as though someone was suffering terribly. The men listened in silence. The crying grew louder and louder. None of them dared investigate. Within seconds, they abandoned their drinks and ran home. The next morning, they returned to the site. Nothing was there. No footprints. No children. No explanation. After that night, reports increased dramatically. Almost everyone who passed the area after dark claimed to experience something strange. Some saw shadows. Others heard voices. Many felt as though someone was following them. Eventually, the villagers sought help from another spiritual master. When he arrived, he immediately began performing a ritual. He burned the talisman. Normally, the paper would burn quickly before turning to ash. But this time something unusual happened. The talisman continued burning without stopping. The flame seemed almost unnatural. The old man frowned. Then he took out a second talisman. Only after burning both did the fire finally extinguish itself. The spiritual master stared toward the old well for a long time. Then he spoke. The spirit has already become extremely powerful. His expression darkened. If nobody had intervened tonight, and if this thing remained here for another 10 years, there would be nothing anyone could do. The villagers felt their blood run cold. Fortunately, the ritual appeared to work. After that night, the sighting stopped. The crying disappeared. The road gradually became safe again. But the stories did not end there. because another family had been dealing with a far more terrifying visitor. Unlike the spirit at the well, this one didn't stay outside. It followed people home, and once it entered a house, it refused to leave. The next story came from a family with a long history of practicing folk magic. For generations, their relatives had created protective talismans designed to keep evil spirits away. Their home was protected by charms placed above both the front and back doors. According to tradition, no ghost should have been able to enter, yet somehow one still did. It started after the narrator's father came home drunk late one night. The family house had two main entrances and one rear entrance. Protective talismans had been placed on most of them, but one doorway had been overlooked. That night, as the father stumbled home after drinking, something followed him through that unprotected entrance. He was too intoxicated to notice. He simply climbed into bed and fell asleep. A short time later, he woke up unable to move. At first, he thought he was dreaming. Then he saw her, a woman, standing beside his bed. Her face was inches from his own, and she was smiling. The thing slowly climbed onto his chest. At first, he thought he was trapped in a nightmare, but then he felt it. Cold skin, wet breath, and a horrible weight pressing down on his body. The woman lowered her face toward him and began licking him. Not gently, not playfully. She dragged her tongue across his face over and over again, leaving his skin soaked. Then the licking became biting. She bit at his cheeks and lips as if she wanted to tear pieces of flesh away. The father tried to scream, but no sound came out. He could only lie there helplessly as the ghost continued tormenting him. That night, his wife was sleeping in another room. She suddenly heard strange noises coming from his bedroom. At first, it sounded like groaning. Then it became louder. She rushed over to investigate. The moment she entered the room, she realized what was happening. According to local belief, her husband was being oppressed by a spirit. After that night, the attacks continued. Every evening, the same thing happened. The ghost would appear. She would climb onto his body. She would lick his face until it was completely wet. Then she would bite and gnaw at him. The father endured it for 3 days. By then, the family was desperate. The mother sought help from a relative known for making protective talismans. Soon afterward, a talisman was placed above the bedroom door. For one night, it seemed to work. The ghost never entered through the doorway. The family thought the problem was over. They were wrong. The following night, the spirit returned through the window. It climbed inside after midnight. Then it resumed exactly where it had left off. Night after night, it entered through the window. Night after night, it crawled onto the father's body. The family became exhausted from fear. One evening, while the ghost was tormenting him again, the mother suddenly shouted her husband's name as loudly as she could. The reaction was immediate. The ghost froze. Then, without warning, it turned and leaped into the mother's room. The spirit moved so quickly she barely had time to react. Suddenly, the woman's face was only inches away from her own. She would never forget its eyes. They were bright red, the color of fresh blood. The mother was terrified, yet she didn't dare challenge it. Instead, she remained silent and pretended not to notice its presence. Throughout the night, strange noises echoed around the house. Footsteps, scratching sounds, objects being moved. At one point, the family heard activity near the rice container in the kitchen. Something appeared to be searching through the grain. The sounds continued until dawn. When morning finally arrived, the family discovered rice scattered all over the floor. It looked as though someone had deliberately dumped it everywhere. That same day, additional talismans were placed throughout the house. Every door, every window, every possible entrance. Only then did the attacks finally stop. The ghost still lingered nearby for a while. Family members occasionally felt its presence outside, but it never managed to enter the house again. Unfortunately, another tragedy would soon overshadow all of these events. A tragedy involving 3 deaths on a river. Around 2010 or 2011, a boat carrying sugarcane was traveling along a river in the Mekong Delta. The vessel was heavily overloaded. On board were 1 man and 2 women. One of the women was heavily pregnant and close to giving birth. The boat carried far more sugarcane than it should have. As a result, water slowly began leaking inside. The situation became dangerous. The man steering the vessel realized something was wrong. Across the river, he spotted a motorboat approaching. Desperate for help, he waved his arms and shouted. Unfortunately, the people on the other boat misunderstood. They thought he was simply greeting them. Instead of slowing down, they accelerated. The speeding boat created a powerful wake. Large waves slammed into the overloaded vessel. The sugarcane boat rocked violently. Then it overturned. All 3 people fell into the water. None of them survived. The entire community mourned the tragedy. A year later, one of the locals experienced something he could never explain. One afternoon around 4:30, he was walking home from school. The road followed the riverbank. Tall vegetation grew everywhere. Large bamboo clusters lined the path. As he approached one particularly dense area, he suddenly heard someone call out to him. "Where are you going?" The voice sounded perfectly normal. He assumed it belonged to someone he knew. He turned around. No one was there. Confused, he looked toward the river. That's when he saw them. 3 dark figures standing near the water. Their faces were impossible to make out, yet somehow he immediately knew who they were. 1 man, 1 woman, and a pregnant woman. The same 3 people who had drowned. Fear exploded through his body. Without looking back, he ran all the way home. To this day, he refuses to travel that road alone. The final story was by far the most disturbing. It involved a woman whose hatred survived long after death. A hatred so powerful that it nearly destroyed an entire family. For privacy, we will call her Mrs. T. Many years ago, Mrs. T married a man we will call Mr. B. Their marriage was miserable. Mr. B treated her terribly. He insulted her, beat her, forced her to perform endless chores. Even when she was sick, he showed little concern. Instead of caring for his wife, he treated her like a servant. As if that wasn't enough, he eventually took another woman as his lover. Mrs. T didn't know about the affair at first. During that period, she was already struggling with health problems. Despite her condition, she was still expected to work every day. She cooked, cleaned, fed the animals, handled the household, and endured constant abuse. Even after giving birth to children, her suffering continued. For years she remained silent. For years she endured everything. Then she discovered the truth. Mr. B had another woman. The revelation shattered her completely. She had devoted her life to her husband. She had sacrificed everything for her family. And this was her reward. The betrayal consumed her. A deep resentment began growing inside her. Eventually, That resentment became unbearable. Mrs. T made a decision. She would end her own life. But before doing so, she walked to the family altar. In a fit of rage, she swept everything onto the floor. Photographs, offerings, religious items, everything. It was as though she wanted to sever all ties with the family forever. Not long afterward, she died. When the funeral was over and her memorial photograph was placed on the altar, something strange happened. A relative known for his spiritual abilities noticed an unusual light coming from the photograph. The moment he saw it, he became deeply concerned. He consulted divination methods and reached a terrifying conclusion. Mrs. T would return, and she would not return peacefully. That very day, her spirit allegedly possessed someone. Through the possessed person, she pointed directly at her husband. Then she made a promise. I will destroy this family. I will take them one by one, and everything they build will collapse. The curse had begun. Years later, around 2018, her spirit allegedly targeted another female relative. The woman happened to be highly compatible with Mrs. T according to local spiritual beliefs. One night, the relative suddenly collapsed. For a time, everyone believed she had died. Later, after recovering, the woman described an impossible experience. She claimed her soul had been taken to the underworld. There she wandered through a strange realm unlike anything she had ever seen. While there, she encountered another deceased family member. To her horror, that relative appeared to be serving Mrs. T. The spirit of Mrs. T had become incredibly powerful. According to the story, she commanded followers and punished those under her control. The deceased relative secretly helped the woman escape. Moments later, she regained consciousness in the world of the living. Terrified, the family sought help from spiritual masters, but every person they consulted gave the same warning. Mrs. T's spirit had become extraordinarily dangerous. Some claimed she was so powerful that a single practitioner would not be enough to stop her. Several masters would need to work together. The family gathered and discussed possible solutions. Unfortunately, according to the story, Mrs. T somehow learned of their plans. That same night, one of the spiritual masters involved in the discussions allegedly died suddenly after returning home. Panic spread throughout the family. The woman who had survived the possession became terrified that she would be next. She continued searching for help. Eventually, a practitioner instructed her to cover herself with protective symbols and pray regularly to Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. For a time, things seemed calmer. But Mrs. T's vengeance was not over. Another victim had already been chosen. This time, it was the narrator's uncle. Several times, he felt compelled to take his own life. The first attempt failed. The rope wasn't long enough. The second attempt also failed after someone discovered him in time. But the uncle understood something frightening. He believed these thoughts were not entirely his own. He felt as though something was influencing him, manipulating him, driving him toward death. Terrified, he traveled to seek help from a respected temple master in Njong province. After listening to the story, the master sighed. "The spirit has become too powerful," he said. "Very few people would dare interfere." Then he added something even worse. "Some fates cannot be avoided." The uncle returned home. That night, the family went to sleep. At around 3 o'clock in the morning, they woke up to screams. The uncle had hanged himself. This time, no one arrived in time to save him. The entire village was horrified. People locked themselves indoors after sunset. Prayers echoed throughout the community day and night. Everyone feared becoming the spirit's next target. Strangely, the person most responsible for Mrs. T's suffering, Mr. B himself, was never the first victim. Perhaps guilt finally caught up with him. Perhaps he realized the damage he had done. Whatever the reason, he eventually left ordinary life behind and entered a temple. There, he spent his remaining years performing charitable work and seeking forgiveness for the way he had treated his wife. Whether it was enough, no one knows. But according to those who told the story, the tragedies gradually stopped after that. And perhaps, for the first time in many years, the restless dead finally found a measure of peace. Or perhaps they were simply waiting, watching, remembering, and refusing to be forgotten.